Okay guys, so tonight's homework is going to look a little different than what we've seen in the past. It's going to look a little bit like a history lesson, but I promise you eventually we will get back to how it relates to literature. So this is part one on 1950s notes and science fiction. And I want to remind you that I want you to take notes in your whisk on all of the bullet points on the slides and then do your summary and question at the end just like normal. So hopefully by the end of this three-part series you'll better understand the history and the influences that inspired the stories we're going to be reading in this science fiction unit. So to begin with, in the 1950s, we saw a lot of soldiers coming back from World War II, finding jobs, creating families, and America experienced this economic boom and a population boom also. So Americans had all of this money, but they were a little afraid to spend it. They remembered the downfall of America during the 1920s and 30s and the Great Depression, and were concerned about what to do with the money once they had it, and so we saw the advent of a couple of different things introduced to home life that kind of changed the way Americans thought and spent their money. So TVs were probably one of the most influential things. Prior to this, Americans were sitting around their radio listening to music and entertainment and getting their news that way. And TVs first came in the 50s, early 50s, and when anything is first and newly created, it's oftentimes really expensive. So when TVs first came out, if you had enough money to afford one, you had one for the entire family, not multiple for the entire family like we now have today. And oftentimes these TVs showed maybe 3 stations, and those stations went off air at 10 o'clock every night. So the TV definitely looked different than what it looks like nowadays. But with TV also came the introduction of commercials. So you had businesses starting to convince Americans to buy their products and to spend that money that they had accumulated after World War II. And it actually worked. People started buying a ton of things. And particularly it seemed that a lot of products were marketed towards the stay-at-home 1950s American housewife. Things that would add to her home life and make her life easier. Fridges, toasters, blenders, dishwashers, clothes washers and dryers. All of those things kind of came out at this time period. And the commercials were a big way to say buy, 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 spend, spend, spend. And Americans definitely did. We also saw TV change politics a little bit. President Eisenhower and Vice President Nixon used TV to help get them elected, and they were one of the first to do this. Nowadays, you see political commercials and people vying for political positions on TV all the time. We've also started to see politicians start to use social media, Facebook and Twitter and that sort of thing. So even how they communicate with Americans now, it has evolved. But at the time in the 50s, they realized how important TV was with communicating to Americans. They also used propaganda through television and through movies and that sort of thing. Propaganda is information or ideas or rumors that are deliberately spread to harm a person or a group. And we saw a lot of propaganda come out around this time period on the idea of communism, and mainly that the communism was bad for America. And it was something that we were so concerned about, we were willing to go to war over it. So I know you've talked about communism probably in the past in some of your government or social studies classes. Tomorrow, this is the end for this first part. So tomorrow we'll talk about communism and how it relates to what was happening during that time period. One of the biggest things that we need to think about is this idea of everybody wanting to be the same. With people buying things and watching things on TV, we had this first kind of mass appeal of being just like everybody else, and the idea or concept of keeping up with the Joneses was coined during this time period. You were watching your neighbors, you were seeing what they were buying. If the Joneses down the street bought a new car, you wanted a new car. If they bought a new TV, you wanted to get a TV. Everybody wanted to be the same. They definitely did not want to be different. To be different would make you stand out, and there was something off about you, something odd. And so that's going to be a theme we're going to see continuously as we look at science fiction during this time period, this idea of sameness. So really kind of think about that and how it relates to communism. Those of you that know or remember the concept of communism and how it might relate to this idea of everybody being the same, if you want to post on Edmodo some of your ideas on communism and the idea of being the same and how that relates to this time period. I will probably give out badges for some of the good commentators. We will have a video in class that goes along with this, and we'll kind of shed a little bit more light on what this all looks like. If you, however, want to go onto YouTube and see if you can find some good documentary style films on the 50s and 60s, and you want to share those on Edmodo, that would be fabulous. I'd probably give out some badges for that as well. So that's it for tonight, part 1. Go ahead and go back to your whisk and write your summary and your question, and I will see you in class tomorrow.